welcome to the C++ product address here at CodeRage 7. We're going to have John Thomas, JT.
Thank you, Anders, and welcome back, everyone. This has been a fun morning in C++ for me, getting here at 7 and talking about what I see as the resurgence of C++, and then, of course, the last hour with Bjarne Strustrup and getting his perspectives on C++ and the world of development in general. So having a great time today. Hope you are as well. So over the next 45 minutes or so, I'd like to share with you some details on what we're doing with C++ and through the form of a product address. And what I'd like to start with, so many of you may have seen this already on the press wire, but we are announcing today the availability of a 64-bit Windows compiler for C Builder XE3. So for XE3 licensees or Rad Studio XE3 licensees, you can go ahead and download that today and start using this compiler now. And for anybody else who purchases C Builder XE3 or Rad Studio XE3 after today, will get that version with that compiler included. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what we're doing here at Embarcadero with regard to C++ and getting some specific technical and product details as well. So C Builder XE3 is the release that we had put out in September and relaunching today with the availability of the 64-bit Windows compiler. And there's a lot of features in there that are really geared towards how to enable you to write C++ applications for the latest operating systems from the major vendors, Microsoft and Apple, including Windows 8 and Mac OS X Mountain Lion, and some new productivity features and runtime features for supporting Windows 8, such as Metropolis UI, and productivity around working with data and binding data with our visual live binding support. But for the most part, what we're going to talk about today is C++ 64-bit compiler and what this means with regard to language compliance, as well as support for multiple operating systems and support for the latest libraries as well. So the announcement is the availability of the 64-bit Windows compiler, but I do want to emphasize with everyone on the line today, and largely what I had talked about in my first session today, is that C++ remains the leading language across all platforms. So it's as important as it ever was, and in some cases more important than ever, especially in this world of multi-client devices everywhere. C++ is an excellent fit for solving that challenge of supporting multiple devices and getting the most out of your applications on those devices across multiple platforms. But in addition to talking about a new compiler available today, this announcement is really also sharing with you a new toolchain and architecture. So this is an important step in the evolution of Embarcadero support for C++. This is a major update and a major architecture release for the future of all of our development tools, not only for C++, but for Delphi as well. So this is really about how we help you take your applications with FireMonkey and get them on multiple devices from a single source code base. So we'll get into some details on that in just a moment. But finally, the other thing that's important about this release is support for the new C++ 11 standard. So by targeting your VCL and FireMonkey applications for 64-bit Windows, you're now able to take advantage of the new C++ 11 language features and library features. So this is a pretty big announcement, which is part of the reason we wanted to spend time with you guys, have a separate C++ CodeRage event where we can get into a bunch of the details around this release with you. So from a market perspective, there is a lot of developers in the world, about 16 million developers worldwide, and using all sorts of languages. C++ is one of the, as we mentioned, well, the leading language across all platforms, which equates to roughly about 3 to 4 million active developers using C and C++. Other popular languages include Java and .NET and Objective-C, especially over the last few years, as well as other languages that support, like dynamic languages and various others. But what's interesting about the sort of average around all of these languages is that there's a lot of code being written. About each year, there's about 52 billion lines of code written. And it's been determined by Evans data that the average cost for delivering a line of production-ready code, this is one line, is about $28 USD. So at $52 billion of lines of code being spent each year, that's about $1.5 trillion worldwide per year spent on developing source code. So that's a very expensive, it's a very, it could be a very expensive proposition, but there's a lot of code being written. And one of the things that we've always done here at Embarcadero, all the way through the pedigree of the early Borland days, is that we help our developers spend less time writing code and delivering at the same time as faster applications to market. Our developer community, including Delphi developers and C++, is about roughly 3 million developers. So out of that 15 million lines of code, or billion lines of code, there's about 9.7 billion lines of code being written by Embarcadero developers. And one of the things that we've done some studies on quite a bit is the approach that we help support with development, and in particular, the visual development approaches and the benefits of using the VCL and FireMonkey frameworks for developers, which relates to about having to write about 80% less code. So effectively, you guys who are using Delphi C++ are spending about $5.60 per line of code. So what does this mean? Well, it means that, one, you save a lot more money in developing applications, but more importantly, you can write more applications, or you can get to market much faster than your competition. So this is an overall value proposition that we've been delivering now for well over 10 years. And this value proposition is about to get even better with our strategy of helping you get to multiple platforms with the same source code base using the same development methodology. So what's going on in the world that's driving this interest and this desire to get to multiple platforms? Well, many of you who've been using Delphi or C++ Builder since their inception have been around in the time when really all that mattered in terms of writing client code was to build Windows applications. And that was largely what Delphi and C++ Builder were originally written for and intended for. And have done quite well there. And as I mentioned, the reason it's done quite well is because it delivered an approach to development that helps save developers time and effort, and able to write better applications faster. So during this time frame, though, another platform really rose to prominence, and that's the web, where the primary client platforms that people were targeting were Windows, of course, because Windows has always been relevant in the more than relevant. It's been the primary client platform, but delivering applications via the web had become another alternative to delivering applications that could take advantage of much of the server-side code that was being written using virtual languages like Java and .NET. The web had become another platform for delivering a user experience to take advantage of that code written and that infrastructure written. But moving into 2012, what we're seeing is the client revolution. And what this means is that the client is back in a big way. The requirement to support a rich user experience on each individual device is more important than ever. So Windows, of course, continues to be the dominant computing platform, but Mac is growing considerably and faster than any other operating system. On the mobile side, we're seeing not only iOS but also Android becoming very important as delivery operating systems for devices as well. In fact, when I talk to a lot of customers about their development needs and goals over the next several years, and I like to ask the question, do you need us to help you get to iOS or Android? And the answer I typically get is both. So it's not a choice that can easily be made between iOS or Android anymore. The simple answer is that developers have to support both of these operating systems. It's not a luxury to choose one or the other. Both are just as valid as the other. And Windows as well continues to be a platform that needs to be fully supported. So there's billions of users in these devices, and that really presents an unprecedented opportunity for you as developers, but also unprecedented challenges using traditional methods of supporting multiple operating systems and devices. Take another look at the client revolution. I really like this chart because it goes pretty far back in terms of client platforms, and I mean back to TRS-80, and I was one of those in the Amiga camp, so it was actually quite entertaining for me to see Amiga listed here, which did around that time have quite a large user base for the operating system, but the majority between basically 1987 up until about 2010, even just a few years ago, has been predominantly Wintel platform, Windows on Intel. And during the 90s and really the last 20 years, Windows has been the primary platform for delivering your client-side applications. But what we've seen is in the last 5 years, and really in the last 2 years in particular, is that in terms of actual client devices, Apple and Android have overtaken Wintel in terms of access to applications on a client device. So what this is saying basically is that more people are using devices such as those from Apple and Android to access applications regularly than they are on their Wintel machines. And this is a pretty interesting change, a pretty stark change. So these three operating systems or platforms in particular are really what is driving a look at how do I get my applications from Windows onto Apple and Android? How do I take advantage of all the code that I've written over all these years? How do I get to Apple and Android, which have completely different approaches, and do that in a way that is effective and efficient? So those are some of the challenges that all application developers are facing today in today's world with this revolution of the client device. So moving beyond this year, we think this client diversity will just continue to expand. So now you're seeing Microsoft also really heavily investing in this space with their tablets, and they've been doing slates on Wintel, but now they're delivering platforms on ARM as well with WinRT. You see, of course, iOS devices continue to grow substantially. You see Android pretty much everywhere, not just in phones and tablets, but also in TVs and in device-specific embedded systems that do pretty much anything that you can think of. So Android in particular is one of these platforms which is really expanding beyond your typical client, which can be thought of as a handheld device that does kind of your day-to-day, but into some special interest type of applications, whether they're home security systems or different types of applications that add to the lifestyle without necessarily being a handheld device. Yet it's something that you'll continue to interact with applications, and those applications need to be built by developers like you. So the biggest challenge that you face is, if you need to move from Windows and take existing source code, perchance, or even write new source code beyond Windows, first of all, developing for Windows, as we know, we just saw $15 trillion being spent, or $1.5 trillion, sorry, being spent on application development or on development. And so if you're looking at just supporting Windows, well, that's one platform to support. But as soon as you start adding other platforms, the cost multiply for each platform that you add. And the main reason that this is the case is because each individual operating system brings along with it its own language, its own framework, and its own set of tools. So where you may be writing Windows development or Windows applications today in Delphi or C++ or .NET, to get onto Apple devices, today you need to learn Objective-C and the Cocoa framework and learn how to use Xcode. To get onto Android, you have to learn the Android Developer Kit and Java and the Dalvik runtime. To get onto other operating systems, you may need to learn other languages and frameworks and use other environments like Eclipse. So this traditional approach for targeting multiple devices basically means managing separate source code bases with different skill sets across each of them. And even though you may be able to get to market with this approach and deliver applications, I think the real cost of this is felt 3 and 5 years down the line when you have to maintain these applications across all these devices and across all these source code bases. When you go to fix it or add a feature to your application, you have to fix it in 4 different places or add it in 4 different places. When you go to fix a bug or a defect in your application, again, 4 different implementations that you have to manage, and that can get extremely costly to continue to develop this way. So really what I'm here to share with you is our strategy of how to manage and target this multiple device world that we live in. And the way that we believe that this should be done is using a single source code strategy. And so the C++ Builder approach is to allow you to build native applications. And when I say native in this case, I mean compiled executable with the native look and feel and access to the services on those devices across all of them using the C++ language with C++ Builder. And we're doing the same thing with our Delphi language, of course, too. But the idea here is that you build the application initially for Windows, which many of you are doing today using the tools Delphi and C++ Builder. And you take that source code by targeting FireMonkey on Windows, and you retarget it for Mac. And you take that same source code and you retarget it for iOS and you retarget it for Android. So in large part, what you're doing is you're reusing all or the majority of your source code. Now, for certain mobile devices, you may wish to build optimized user interfaces. So you may want to build new interfaces for a tablet in landscape mode, for example, or a phone device in portrait mode. But you can keep these forms in the same source code base and take those across all of these platforms using the FireMonkey framework and the C++ language. So this is meant to not only save you money and time, but also to help you be way more competitive than anybody else out there, because you can take one source code base, get to all these platforms quicker than anybody else, and then when it comes time for maintenance, you're just enjoying the benefits of this approach. So why C++ and why Delphi for this approach? Why native languages that Embarcadero has been supporting and is taking forward into this space? Well, we believe that the native code is pretty key for a client device user experience. In the past, when applications were being written, we talked about the evolution of a Windows client, rich client, to web becoming a major platform. Well, those applications were largely being delivered by writing server-side applications using virtual code platforms like Java or .NET. And a big part of the reason why Java or .NET were selected for these types of applications is because the applications they were building were looking at code safety and protection. That was one of their key initiatives for building these applications. And you saw them being used a lot for operational type applications, such as customer relation management systems, for example. And when it came time to scale the application, there was a very good method for doing this on the server side, which was basically add more hardware and load balance your application across more hardware blades. So this approach to scale the application based on the users worked very well. And the reason it worked well is because the user experience that was being delivered, typically through a web browser, didn't need to be overly complicated, or didn't really need client-side to deliver a rich client-side experience. It was delivering a lot of functionality, but that functionality was being created out on the server side and then delivered as a view, basically, through a web browser. But as we saw in that earlier chart, where client devices, iOS and Android in particular, are just growing substantially in the usage, is that the user experience expectation is key for success of applications on these platforms. And delivering that user experience cannot be done the same way that it used to be. It can't be written on the server side and delivered through a simplified web experience as web pages. Rather, it needs to be delivered as a rich client. And that means that your hardware profile is fixed. It's whatever you have on that device. You have an ARM processor of some sort, you have some GPU, you have a certain amount of memory, and that's what you have to work with. So you really need a language that can take advantage of the hardware and get the most out of it, and an application framework that can really help you deliver on a unique or a user experience to meet the expectations of your typical mobile user these days. And so your user experience now is really confined to this device, and that's why native code such as C++, Objective-C, and Delphi are becoming so important in terms of delivering against these client devices. So C++ in itself is actually a really good choice. It continues to be amazingly popular for all sorts of applications. I know Bjarne was talking about C++ being used primarily for infrastructure and server-side development. But if you look at sites like SourceForge, where host most of the open source projects out there, a large portion of these projects are applications, user-side applications, written in C and C++. And many of the tools that we depend on a day-to-day basis to just basically work with computers are written in C++. From the operating systems themselves to the databases that drive the data we access, to the office productivity solutions that we use. So for instance, Microsoft Word and Outlook, or tooling like Adobe Photoshop, or the IDEs as developers that we use on a daily basis. These are written in native languages like C++ across the board. So the C++ usage definitely extends beyond infrastructure and servers and into these daily applications that we use every day. And interestingly, to me, in particular, is that even top web companies, the companies that present their product as a web page or a set of services that are accessible through web technologies, their applications are actually written in C and C++. This includes companies like Facebook and PayPal and Amazon. The bulk of their applications are written in C++, and then they present to the end user through the web the user experience. I think most of you have probably heard recently that Facebook in particular, which has put a lot of effort into HTML, and they deliver a pretty rich user experience using HTML on desktop browsers, were lamenting at the fact that they may have reached their their limit with HTML, and that in particular on mobile devices like iOS, they have to turn to a native solution in order to continue to deliver on that user experience and to expand that user experience. So they're one of the companies that have recognized that you can get pretty far with web, but to deliver the kind of user experience that they need to stay competitive and to take advantage of their infrastructure, they're turning to native languages like C++ to deliver on those. So in addition to infrastructure, C++ is as important as ever for client-side application development, and continues to be and has consistently been a top language for years and years and years and years. So I believe this is from the TOB index, where you see C-based languages, C++ languages up at the top of the chart there. So this leads us into our current release, which is the new C++ Builder XE3. And as I mentioned, this is more than just a compiler release for a new targeted platform, but it's really a architecture and strategy release. And as I mentioned, our strategy is to help developers take a single source code base that may originally have been written to target Windows and be able to target Mac and iOS and Android and other devices as necessary over the next several years. But the important thing is to help them maintain a single source code base across all these platforms. And we're doing this for both Delphi and C++ languages, which share a common infrastructure and architecture, and we'll talk about that in a moment, and a framework. So C++ Builder XE3 is a native multi-device development solution. And in XE3 today, with the release of 64-bit Windows compiler, Windows and Mac are fully supported as client devices for this release. And we've announced that we're delivering against iOS and Android in 2013. So the idea is that you're building for desktop operating systems today, and you'll be able to target iOS and Android in 2013. But one of the things I'm really proud of about this release, and I know is important to C++ developers in particular, is standards compliance. And in addition to supporting the standards through the years, this release really is at the top of the industry in terms of supporting the latest C++ language standard, C++ 11. And of course, there's other language standards around ANSI C and C99, et cetera, that are supported in this release. But C++ 11 in particular is a significant release from the Standards Committee, and one that's supported in this release. One of the benefits of supporting the language, the latest features of language, is now we can support the latest features of the libraries, including the standard template library. We deliver a Dinkumware version of STL, and we're able to support the latest version of Dinkumware, as well as the latest version of Boost, which is a critical library for developing C++ applications. And by supporting the latest version of Boost, this also opens up the capability to support many other standard or C++ libraries like ACE and Tau and Loki and many others. So this is significant in terms of the compiler being up to date with the latest and greatest in terms of language and library support. But a couple other things that are important here is that we continue to deliver on, even though we're supporting this latest standard, we're expanding our compatibility. We are bringing forward all the compatibility from the years of this pedigree of C++ and rapid application development with C++, these agile C++ language extensions that we've built over the years. We're bringing those forward into XE3 so that you can take an existing VCL application or a FireMonkey application written in C++ Builder and retarget it for 64-bit. And then finally, compatibility with the CLang or Clang front end as well. This is the same front end that Apple uses to support Objective-C and C++. So there's compatibility with a very large developer community as well. So a couple more specifics about XE3. In addition to what I just talked about with regard to language and libraries, we also support the latest operating systems from Microsoft and Apple. So Windows 8 being the most recent release from Microsoft, delivered a new look and feel, which was formerly known as Metro. And what we've delivered in this release is the ability to use C++ to deliver Metro-style desktop applications. And what this means is that you take your existing source code, which runs on the Win32 desktop today, or Win64 desktop with today's compiler, and you can style it to look and feel just like a Microsoft Metro-style application. We call this feature Metropolis. And the basic idea is to use the styling engine that we made available to VCL and FireMonkey in the previous release to build applications that look and feel just like Windows 8 applications. Now, Windows 8 applications that have this look and feel have to use a new operating system from Microsoft called WinRT, but we're able to deliver the same experience, allowing you to use the existing desktop. So not only can you deliver this feature on a Windows 8 machine, an Intel-based machine, but you can also deliver this all the way back to Windows XP through Vista and 7, and take existing VCL and FireMonkey apps and migrate them to this new look and feel to deliver on the user experience that people are expecting with Windows 8, but not having to write any new code. You'll be the first to market with this feature to take your existing applications and bring them to Windows 8. And so when I say bring them to Windows 8, I mean bring them to an Intel-based Windows 8 that has a desktop available to it. And that includes not only any desktop computer and laptop computer, but also slates, which have been around for a while. But these tablets that Microsoft and their partners like Samsung and others have been producing, including Microsoft's own new hardware, which is the Surface Pro. So you'll be ready for these new devices as they come aboard, or if they're already out there, you can already build applications for them. So fully supporting the VCL and FireMonkey 2, which is new in this release of XE3, and delivering more than just the look and feel, but also the specifics around the device. It is a mobile device after all, these slates, so having access to gestures and touch, and not stylus-style touch either, but the fat finger touch that's common on these new user experiences, access to sensors and services like gyroscopes and accelerometers and location services, and the features of Windows 8. So this is something that's a big part of XE3 that you can take advantage of and write both 32-bit and 64-bit applications as of today. In addition to Microsoft Windows, we also fully support Mac OS X Mountain Lion, the most recent release from Apple. And this means native support for OS X Mountain Lion, which from an operating system perspective is largely incremental in terms of features, but from a hardware perspective actually delivers a whole new experience in the high-res display, the Retina display. So this is a new challenge for developers because it means maintaining another set of art assets and thinking about how to lay out your application so that it can support both the standard display and the Retina display. This is something that we automatically support in FireMonkey. As you use our user controls, you're able to use assets that are either standard UI assets or are optimized for the Retina display. And these applications are fully Mac App Store compatible. In XE3, with this new version of FireMonkey, we've also extended it to support rendering bitmaps, which means you can deliver pixel-perfect UI controls on top of this native OS. So a very significant release in terms of supporting the latest releases from both Microsoft and Apple with both Delphi and C++ Builder and C++ language. So a little more details on FireMonkey 2. It's a major upgrade in XE3. We brought forward many of the features that developers who've used the VCL for many years had asked for and really care about. Things like layout management with anchors and alignment, actions and action lists, multimedia support, spending a lot of time on the overall runtime performance and quality. We're seeing a lot more support from third parties, and we've added features, like I mentioned, with the bitmap rendering and pixel-perfect controls, support for non-client area styling as well. So now if you're building custom styles, you're able to use that to paint the whole window view and deliver some really unique and compatible looking applications across all operating systems. And FireMonkey 2 is mobile ready. As I mentioned, in the Windows 8 tablet side, we've added features to support sensors and services, for example, and touch and gestures and all these features that are critical in delivering a mobile user experience. So just a quick comparison, FireMonkey 1 was focused on WinMac. FireMonkey 2 extends that support for the latest operating systems and is starting to deliver now in a live beta today for iOS and Android in 2013. In FireMonkey 1, it really was for mobile on iOS. It was really a desktop on mobile experience, whereas in FM2, it's really a fully native mobile experience. And moving from vector UIs to, in addition, now being able to support bitmap UIs. And this gives us the ability now to deliver these pixel-perfect native user interfaces and extend beyond just standard resolution, but also Retina resolutions. And finally, the performance and quality has been improved vastly between these last two versions. But in addition to the runtime, we also continue to deliver on developer productivity. And one of the new features in FireMonkey was live bindings. This capability, this flexibility to bind any two pieces of data together, really, and used primarily for data access, taking data from a SQL query and putting it into some UI controls. Well, it was very flexible, and as such required in the original release coding regular expressions and functional expressions to be able to convert data or bind data from one set to another. But what we did in this latest release of XE3 is we made this visual. We took the concept that we know works well with visual development and brought it to live binding. So now connecting data really is just as simple as connecting lines between any two pieces of data that you want to connect. So this provides a capability to easily bring data into your applications, but also really allow your applications to interact with one another purely through data. And by the way, this approach, I think, really lends itself well to approaches like model view, view model, which I know Malcolm will be talking about during this conference. So that's definitely a talk I recommend checking out. Also in XE3 is a new version of Interbase and a new Interbase to Go, which is an embedded database with deployment licenses included in Rad Studio. So now you can take Interbase to Go and embed that into your application. You don't have to deploy client-side libraries. You don't have to deploy a database server anywhere. You can take the database with you and get the full power and benefit of using a SQL database and Interbase across Windows and Mac, and we're taking this forward as well into the mobile space as well. And we've also introduced in this release HTML5 Builder, which is a release that's focused on not only supporting server-side development with PHP, but also client-side development with HTML, CSS3, and JavaScript. And this has become an increasingly popular way to deliver applications onto mobile operating systems. So in this release, there's been particular emphasis paid on how to build applications using web technologies, using mobile designers like you see pictured here inside HTML5 Builder to build a single source web application that can run natively through packaging and signing and distributed through app stores for iOS, Android, BlackBerry, and Windows Phone. So this is really the way to get to native today in XE3, with the future releases providing the native access to getting to native. So on the client side, HTML5 Builder is used to build, well, let's start with the client server side. You can use PHP to deliver web apps that run through a browser. So PHP is generating that HTML. You can deliver m.apps, which are mobile optimized, and again, PHP is generating that code that is optimized for a mobile form factor. Or you can actually generate an application that can run on a mobile device and uses the client-server architecture to generate your application UI through HTML. Or you can build now in HTML5. You can build a pure client-side application. You can build pure HTML5 and JavaScript CSS3 for web in a browser, for an MDOT application, or a mobile web app. And so this requires the ability to package and sign this, and all this is fully supported in HTML5 Builder in this release. So, we've talked a lot about how native user experience is critical on the client side. HTML5, as I mentioned, is the way to get to mobile today, and it does have some advantage. I mean, you can get to market very quickly, but it's particularly suited for things like more simple UIs, and where high latency environments are okay. For instance, checking my bank account. It's okay if I have to wait a few seconds to ask it to go back to the server and pull that data. And it's, that data is largely produced out in the cloud somewhere, where the HTML5 is used primarily as a presentation layer. But native has advantages as well, and this is where we're talking about this user experience, this richer user experience, more complex UIs or sophisticated UIs, but more importantly, where you have high processing client-side requirements, or where low latency is critical for your application. You can't wait several seconds for data to be queried and delivered. So native can be used as well for no more than just presentation, but the application logic and data layers all on the client side solely. So you have choices in getting to mobile, and they have advantages and disadvantages. And HTML5 Builder is the way to help you get there today. And we'll talk a little bit now about what we're working on in the labs to help you get there on the mobile side with native. But before we do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about, getting to XE3 really has taken years of experience and development, starting with the Turbo C++ products way back when, and moving through Borland C++ and C++ Builder, which were targeting Windows. This pedigree, in fact, much of the development team is the same team that has been delivering these products over the years, and now is helping to deliver for this multi-device world for Windows, Mac, and eventually next year iOS and Android. And the way we're doing this is with a new compiler architecture, a new tool chain. This is an architecture for the future. And what this means is that are building technologies that not only help us deliver on the experience that you get today with C++ Builder for using rapid application development and talking to the VCL and FireMonkey application frameworks, but also getting full standards compliance for C++ 11 and compatibility with Borland C++, C++ Builder, and Clang CLang, and the latest libraries like STL Boost and Loki and Ace. And we do this by having a new front end that generates and creates these PME extensions that are critical for this type of development environment, and rich RTTI into an IR that then gets put into a new backend. And this new backend is a CodeGen engine that not only allows us to target Intel processors, and today, with the first release of the 64-bit Windows, you see this architecture fully implemented to target Intel 64-bit, but also in 2013, we're targeting ARM. And this architecture is something that is shared now between Delphi and C++. So Delphi is using the same engine to generate ARM code to get us onto iOS and Android, and same will be for C++ Builder in 2013. So just to reiterate, new C++ standard. We've heard Bjarne Strustrup this last hour, and he's rightfully very proud of this release. It was a lot of effort from the standards committee. Herb Sutter's part of that committee as well. And both of them are very excited about the prospects of C++ and what C++ 11 means in terms of its freshness and its ability to deliver in today's modern application development world. So why C++ Builder? There's lots of C++ compilers out there. Why ours? Why C++ Builder? Well, what we're talking about today with the release of 64-bit Windows is that we are delivering a native multi-device targeting development environment with the cost and time effort of single platform development. So this is a single source code strategy across multiple platforms. And this architecture that we are announcing and shipping this first compiler on today is how we're going to get there. And we're going to be able to deliver not only the latest in C++ language compliance, but also the full agile visual development experience that you've been enjoying for years in C++ Builder. With Windows and Mac targeting today, and iOS and Android in 2013. So I only have a few more minutes, but I quickly want to talk about what we're doing on the mobile side. What we're talking about is a common architecture between C++ and Delphi for native ARM tool chains. We're going to be delivering native iOS and Android platform support. That means a native RTL and FireMonkey, access to native APIs, a new mobile framework, which is a subset because we're optimizing things like the RTL for mobile, but also a superset of the desktop framework because we're bringing to it features that are beyond the desktop, such as access to services and sensors that may only be on mobile devices, but also a development experience that's really suited for mobile. So mobile form designers. This way, one of the big challenges of mobile development is working within different form factors and layouts and orientations. So we're giving the development environments that help manage the complexities of dealing with multiple layouts and form factors. So in early 2013, we'll see Delphi release for iOS, which would support iOS, iPad, etc., and then later on in the year, Android support. And the goal is that source code built on iOS is completely compatible and portable to Android. So you're going to be able to take a single source code base across both of these platforms with the latest support for all the sensors, native UI, native user experience with UI styles and designer styles, as well as the full application stack. So in addition to just UX and application logic, embedded and enterprise database support and full data snap middleware support. And this code is compatible with XE3, Windows, Mac, FireMonkey 2 approach. So beyond desktop, but to tablet and phones for HD and 3D, automatically managing things like standard to Retina display for you with a fully integrated environment for design, development, debugging, and deployment, and supporting not only App Store deployment, but also, of course, debug deployment and ad hoc development within an enterprise. So to summarize, with the announcement today of this new 64-bit C++ compiler, we're talking about our strategy as a multi-device solution company and the importance of a single source framework and the importance of native in this multi-device world. And to remind people that we actually come from a very long line of C++ development. And we've been a long-time leader in C++, and we continue to be as we drive it into this future world of multi-device. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the morning so far of C++. And I think we have a few minutes to take some questions, Anders, before the FireMonkey presentation at 10 a.m.
Yes, we do. Let's just switch seats here for a second. All right, and JT should be live on the other microphone now. Thank you.
Testing one.
All right, let me see what we got for you. Oh, interesting. Weird. We'll have to save it. Okay. Latest boost. Use 1.5 or 1.52 or 1.39? There's a bunch of numbers in
so
here.
yeah, I should clarify. Latest boost is supported in the 64-bit compiler, which I believe is at version 1.52. May have 1.5 written in the slides. And the 32-bit compiler continues its 1.39, which was the previous version.
Okay. Full CodeRage agenda. We'll put that up soon. Microsoft announced several years ago a display technology that essentially was to be a Retina 2 level quality display type. Do you have any updates on this? And is there imminent support or an announcement coming from Embarcadero for it?
That's a good question. nothing obviously public, but one of the things that I think you should see with FireMonkey 2 is this ability to deliver against different types of resolutions, formats, and pixel density formats. And that largely comes down to being able to render the proper art asset depending on the display. So in FireMonkey 2 with bitmaps, for example, we can deliver several sets of art assets to draw the controls, and the framework can load the appropriate set depending on the display technology, whether standard or Retina. So as other display models come on board, then we have a very straightforward mechanism to support those.
All right. What platforms does the 64-bit compiler support today?
Well, it supports Windows 64-bit, and that includes Windows Vista, Windows 7, and Windows 8.
Okay. Is 64-bit a factor on any mobile device?
Well, most of those ARM compilers are 64-bit CPUs. I meant ARM CPUs, not V7 CPUs. So 64-bit is a factor for us on Windows because there's many Windows applications that either need more data access or larger memory access, or they need to interoperate with 64-bit applications like Office. If you're automating Office, for example, and it's a 64-bit version of Office, you need to use a 64-bit binary to do that, or IIS as another example if you're building a DLL for it without having to write thunking layers. So it's critical on the Windows side for us to help our customers take VCL and FireMonkey app forward. On the mobile side, it's not as critical because there's limited memory, first of all, in general compared to the desktop. But most of those ARM compilers ARM processors are 64-bit anyways. It's just built, they're just delivered that way today.
I hear of many new properties, but many customers need 32-bit for some years. Is a Clang-based and therefore C++11 supporting compiler planned for 32 bits as well? If yes, when? If no, why not?
The answer is yes. This is our future platform and architecture, and the way that we're going to deliver on C++11 32-bit Windows, it will be to backport this new architecture back to 32-bit. Though at this time we're not ready to announce any dates or availability for that.
Okay. What about 64-bit for OS X?
That's a wonderful question. So our priorities right now are to enable iOS and Android. So we're building those ARM tool chains, deliver on that. 64-bit OS X is, I think, an important platform as well. We've also heard customers asking for Linux support and a few other operating systems, and WinRT is one that comes to mind as well. So we haven't made a final determination on the overall priority beyond iOS and Android support or the ARM-based platforms. But what I would ask is that when we do our annual surveys, please give us your thoughts on what platforms are most important to you beyond those so that we can prioritize accordingly.
Is it easy to import an existing BCB project, version 6, into XE3?
Well, I believe moving the project, the easiest way would be go through versions because there's version upgrade wizards that help you move from one project format to another. Once you get the project supported, the actual code is largely portable, though if you go back to C Builder 6, you'll need to do some work to move to Unicode to move forward, and we have plenty of papers describing how to do that. So there will be a little effort moving from C Builder 6 to XE3, but it certainly would be worthwhile, especially if you're looking at supporting 64-bit Windows and mobile devices in the future.
Ralph is saying you've made a major leap forward. Visual Studio 2012 currently is supporting x86 only, I believe.
Yeah, we're very pleased and proud of this release. You know, to get our developers on 64-bit is one thing, but to have a new architecture that we can help take developers beyond Windows and support today's reality of multi-device, multi-platform, we think is going to be critical for our success and for the success of our customers.
Can you give us a link for the 64-bit update? And David was kind enough to post an answer. C Builder XE3 customers will find the link to the update on the registered user downloads page at cc.embarcadero.com/myreg. So that's actually been posted a couple times here. Are you going to add native SDL support?
Well, basically our rendering approach is to use GPU or hardware accelerated libraries like OpenGL on non-Windows platforms and DirectX, Direct3D, etc. on Windows platforms. SDL is definitely an interesting library. It's not something that we intend to natively support with FireMonkey at this time, but it's certainly something you could integrate and use within our tool set.
Okay. Ralph says, love Embarcadero, but this presentation seems to be an announcement of future directions for the C++ product rather than what are the major advancements in the current release other than 64-bit support.
Okay, well, I definitely talked about XE3, and I think some of the major advances there beyond the 64-bit compiler is support for Windows 8 and support for Mac OS X Mountain Lion with Retina, support for visual live bindings, and all the advances in FireMonkey. So I don't know, maybe you missed that part of the presentation, but there's definitely major advances in XE3, of which the 64-bit compiler for C++ is just one feature.
And keep in mind, this was also a product address, so we'll see many more demos and have much more discussions with R&D folks throughout the next couple of days here at CodeRage as well.
Yep.
So we'll dig deep into all the features and everything that's new and good about the new 64-bit.
Certainly stick around for Darren's discussion of FireMonkey too, if you want to know what's new, because there was a lot of effort and advances made in FireMonkey in particular.
Yeah. And of course, this question: when will FireMonkey support Linux? That's a roadmap question. Basically, when we're supporting Linux.
Like I mentioned, we haven't announced any delivery dates for that. Something I've been hearing come up again and again. Best way to get us to vote for Linux, if you will, is to participate in the annual surveys, which we typically launch around March, and let us know the importance of that platform for you. And you know, we're also going to be asking what type of development you do on Linux. What I'm hearing from most people is that server side only is pretty critical, whereas building client side applications is less critical. With that said, of course, in 2013, we will be supporting Linux by supporting Android. So that is a pretty major release in that regard. But in terms of standard server-side or desktop Linux, that's going to be a future roadmap item.
I'd like to thank JT for his presentation.
And I'd like to thank everyone for joining this morning, and hope you guys are enjoying all the C++ talk. Just stick around. There's a lot of good stuff we have over the next few days, and really kicked off great with Bjarne Strustrup, and got a lot of great material for you over the next few days.